Have you ever wondered what event could spark a war so devastating that it would last a decade? It all began with the abduction of a single woman, Helen of Sparta, known as the most beautiful woman in the world. Paris, a prince of Troy, was promised Helen by the goddess Aphrodite after he judged her the fairest of the goddesses in a contest. But there was a problem. Helen was already married to Menelaus, the king of Sparta. When Paris abducted Helen, it wasn't just an act of love, it was a declaration of war. The Greeks, led by Menelaus and his brother Agamemnon, mustered their forces to retrieve Helen and punish Troy. This single act of passion and betrayal would ignite a conflict that would echo through the ages, the Trojan War. When Menelaus learned that Helen had been taken, he was furious. But this wasn't just a personal matter, this was a matter of honor. The kings of Greece, united by old pacts, vowed to help Menelaus get his wife back. This wasn't just any army gathering, it was the assembly of the greatest heroes in Greek mythology. Mighty Achilles, known for his near invincibility, and clever Odysseus, the master strategist, answered the call. Heroes like Ajax, Diomedes, and Nestor joined them. Even the gods took sides. Zeus, Hera, Athena, and Apollo all had their favorites in this war. The stage was set, and soon the Greek fleet set sail for Troy. But as they arrived at the shores of this great city, they quickly realized that this war would not be won easily. The walls of Troy were impenetrable, and the city had its own legendary defender, Hector, Prince of Troy, a warrior unmatched in battle. For 10 long years, the Greeks laid siege to the mighty city of Troy, and yet the walls stood firm. Both sides suffered great losses. Achilles proved himself a nearly unstoppable force on the battlefield, cutting down Trojan soldiers like they were nothing. But Hector, Prince of Troy, stood as the city's greatest defender. Both men, driven by duty and honor, clashed on the battlefield numerous times. But it wasn't just about swords and shields. Gods constantly interfered, pushing the war in different directions. Athena favored the Greeks, while Apollo sided with the Trojans. Zeus, the king of the gods, tried to maintain balance, but even he couldn't control everything. The war wasn't just physical, it was a battle of wills. The Greeks grew weary as the years dragged on. How long could they hold out? And how long could Troy resist? The fate of both sides seemed uncertain, and the gods themselves seemed undecided on who should win. The war reached a turning point when Hector killed Achilles' close friend, Patroclus, thinking he was Achilles himself. Patroclus had worn Achilles' armor to rally the Greek troops, while Achilles, angered by a dispute with Agamemnon, refused to fight. When Achilles learned of his friend's death, his rage knew no bounds. Achilles returned to battle, his heart set on revenge. The stage was set for the greatest duel of the Trojan War, Achilles versus Hector. The two warriors met outside the walls of Troy, and after a fierce battle, Achilles defeated Hector. In his grief and fury, Achilles dishonored Hector's body, dragging it behind his chariot around the walls of Troy. Hector's death was a devastating blow to the Trojans. Without their greatest hero, the city's defenses were weakened, and their hope began to fade. The duel between Achilles and Hector wasn't just the clash of two men. It was the beginning of the end for Troy. Achilles had long been the most feared warrior on the battlefield. His rage and skill were unmatched. But even Achilles had his weakness, his heel. According to legend, Achilles' mother, Thetis, had dipped him in the river Styx as a baby, making him nearly invincible. However, she held him by his heel, leaving that one part vulnerable. Paris, the man who had started this war by abducting Helen, would be the one to end Achilles' life. Guided by the god Apollo, Paris shot an arrow that struck Achilles in the heel, killing him. Achilles' death was a monumental moment in the war. The Greeks lost their most powerful warrior, and the morale of their army plummeted. But the war continued, and the Greeks still sought a way to breach the walls of Troy. Achilles' fall was tragic, but it set the stage for the final and most cunning move of the war. With Troy's defenses still holding strong after 10 years, the Greeks needed a new strategy. It was Odysseus, the master of cleverness, who devised the plan that would finally bring Troy to its knees: the Trojan Horse. The Greeks built an enormous wooden horse and left it outside the gates of Troy, pretending to surrender and sail home. Inside the horse, however, were hidden Greek soldiers ready to strike. The Trojans, thinking they had won, brought the horse into the city as a symbol of their victory. That night, as the Trojans celebrated, the Greek soldiers emerged from the horse, opened the gates for the rest of the Greek army, and the city of Troy fell. This act of deception sealed Troy's fate, proving that sometimes the greatest victories are won not by strength, but by cunning. The night the Greeks emerged from the Trojan Horse was the last night Troy would ever stand. The Greeks poured into the city, setting it aflame and slaughtering its people. Men, women, and children were killed, and Troy's once great walls crumbled. King Priam was slain, and Paris, whose actions had started the war, met his own end. The destruction of Troy wasn't just the end of a city, it was the end of an era. The war, fueled by pride, betrayal, and the gods' interference, had brought ruin to both sides. The Greeks, though victorious, had lost countless heroes and suffered enormous losses. The tragic consequences of hubris, pride, and betrayal were laid bare in the smoldering ruins of Troy. The Trojan War left behind a legacy that has echoed through the ages. It wasn't just a war of men, it was a conflict involving gods, fate, and the most basic human emotions. The lessons of the war are clear. Pride, betrayal, and hubris lead to destruction. Paris's act of abducting Helen wasn't just a personal affront, it was a symbol of the dangerous consequences of desire and pride. Achilles' rage, Hector's honor, and Odysseus's cunning all played roles in this epic story. The fall of Troy remains a timeless tale, reminding us that no city, no matter how strong, and no hero, no matter how powerful, is immune to the consequences of their actions. The gods may have played their part, but in the end, it was human pride and betrayal that led to Troy's downfall. What can we learn from this ancient tale of war and deception? That sometimes our greatest strengths are also our greatest weaknesses.